this committee will allow a court of law that will not be biased to handle this matter. Therefore, this matter is closed here at the Senate and is adjourned.
As the case stands adjourned, Sinadir and the parties aggrieved, it isn't clear what the next line of action for the Senate will be. From the National Assembly, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Well, yesterday on a sister program, Politics Today, my colleague Shionwo Kimbaloe had both Mr. Monday Ubani, SAN, and Senator Peter Nwebonye on their own thoughts on what transpired yesterday at the Senate. This morning, we're being joined by Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, who is a former Minister of Education, a former VP, Vice President at the World Bank for Africa, and also the former Chancellor. I believe that she stepped down from that position now. I want to say the founder of the School of Fixed Politics, who was there yesterday at the Senate Ethics and Privileges hearing. We also have in the studio here with us Dr. Abiola Akiode, who's the Executive Director, Women Advocates Research and Documentation Center, and also the convener of Womanifesto. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Malfoy.
Well, Dr. Ezekwesili, I'm going to start with you because you were at the heart of what transpired yesterday. You went there as a witness to the petition that was laid before the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges. What were your expectations at that committee hearing?
Thank you so much. So the expectation was and continues to be that the Senate and the senators would understand the criticality of fair hearing as the cornerstone of any democratic system, and that whenever that is not recognized, that it imperils the entire democracy and justice system of a country. And so going as a witness along with the petition, Dr. Akiode Afolabi and myself wanted to ensure that that petitioner would get all he needed to get from the committee, because he said that he had objections to presenting the petition immediately before them. He wanted that they would address those two objections. Number one objection, he said that at various times, members of the Senate, and especially the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges, had made public statements that already discredited his senator, for whom he signed a petition of sexual harassment against the Senate president, and that therefore they already have a perception of the matter. They already have a position on the matter. And so coming before them would not give the justice that they expect through fair hearing. So he asked that a newly constituted committee that would inspire confidence would be necessary. And that number two, he needed the principal witness in the petition to be with him, because he felt that he was not served by her being on suspension illegally, unconstitutionally, as we know that the rules of the Senate are not superior to our laws, to judicial precedents, and to our Constitution. Therefore, he asked that his senator be allowed to accompany him in the discussion of the petition, which the two of us were clearly interested in getting the chair of the committee as well as the members of the committee to acknowledge and to grant. But all we faced yesterday, Dr. Abiola Atiobe Atolabi and I, all we faced yesterday was a repeat of a pattern of using Senate rules to make sure that our voices were stifled, that we couldn't express. They either said we should shut the microphone, or they said you cannot speak, or they said the rules will not allow you to express it. It was unbelievable. It was just a repeat pattern of a culture of saying, even when you have your right, we do not recognize it because we are the powerful people. And that should not be acceptable in this society.
Well, I do not know if you watched the account given by Mr. Monday Ubani and also Senator Peter Wemboye yesterday on a sister program, Politics Today. Mr. Monday Ubani said it was a matter of administration of oath. Was that why? I mean, you have given the background now as to why the petitioner felt uncomfortable with giving his own side or adopting what it was that he had been submitted in an affidavit. Was that the reason why he refused to have an oath administered on him?
That was the reason why he initially refused. But when his counsel, and she's right there in the studio with you, when his counsel saw the way that things were orchestrated, she then said, and allow yourself to be administered into oath, which he did. And when we saw the way that he was being, more or less harassed in the engagement, we then decided that we also, who had initially said we were not going to be on oath until the petitioner was comfortable to render his petition to the committee, then said we were also ready. I definitely said I was ready to be on oath. They ignored it. They ignored it and ignored it. And then this senator, who had a torrent of insults, was basically saying, interjecting, and then they took the floor. Meanwhile, in what capacity? The people are misrepresenting a bit. He was not there in the capacity of a senator who is member of that committee. No, he said he came as a witness for the Senate president. And therefore, he was in equivalent status as myself and Dr. Afolabi. Yet, they ignored us in that declaration for oath to be administered, and allowed him, without oath administered on him as a witness, to start saying, oh, they are not serious. Since they are not serious with what they want to do, I am ready. Administer the oath on him. They didn't administer the oath on him even then, but he went ahead to talk. Now, when he said that, it was a repeat of what the committee members had in fact started off the meeting with after they heard the petitioner say he had those objections. Oh, listen, we're not on serious we don't do, maybe Dr. Abiola would remember it well. Something about, basically casting us as unserious. And, for the life of me, what is unserious about a demand for fair hearing? This is exactly the same pattern. I don't think Nigerians are realizing that what we have here is a monopoly, a massive of power that will not be questioned by the citizens. This is what's going on. Our senators are essentially saying we are above the law just because we have the appellation senator to our name. And that should not be acceptable. So when the senator repeated that remark of unseriousness, I turned to him and I said, "Can you please shut up?" And he was already actually trading words, in the sense that he was calling, saying to the petitioner, if you don't want to speak, just let it be. There are renditions of this. So he was already energized to engage in what you saw yesterday. There was nothing about my saying that to him was in response to his behavior, not the other way around. I mean, you don't just simply say to a person, "Please shut up." Something must have led to it. It was his indecorous way of shutting down the petitioner that made me, as a witness that accompanied the petitioner, to say to him, "Please shut up. Let him talk." So that's it.
But, listening to Senator Nweboyi yesterday, my colleague Sheung also managed to ask him, if he felt regrets about, how events transpired yesterday. And he categorically said, no, he didn't feel any regrets. But I do know that, looking at the entire scenario, a lot of Nigerians watched that video in shock. Wondering how could things have descended to this level. For you, do you think that there's anything that could have been done differently to prevent that?
I have very much reflected on it, and I come to the conclusion that from our own side of the table, we needed to be very firm on the fact that we were not going to accept the subordination of the laws of the land and the Constitution on the freedom to express ourselves, especially within a public institution like the Senate, which is the highest lawmaking organ of the country. We were not going to, allow anyone to stifle us. That was what the Senate committee members did in a chorused manner, an orchestrated all through the period that we were there. And at the time, the gentleman basically doubled the energy of that disrespect and was basically not in any way respecting the petitioner and carried on. You could see, I didn't just simply look at a person and say, "Please shut up." No, that's not what happened. The sequence of events show clearly that it was in response to what they were doing, which is reminiscent of exactly where we came from on this matter. A person has a voice to express, but through abuse of power, senators collectively decided that they are not listening and they are not willing to grant that access that the Constitution gives. So for me, there is nothing that we could have done other than to say, we must be heard. And once I was saying, "Please swear me to an oath," and they were ignoring and putting off my microphone. They had this young man that had the duty to just keep, he kept doing that. You saw how very composed we were. We did not allow ourselves. I mean, we could have been born as that fellow. We could have, but we didn't do that. We didn't descend to that. It was, you could see the response that came from my own end. So there is nothing that we can look at and say, oh, in the context of what we were facing, we should have done differently. And I am very good at being able to say, okay, this is something that didn't work. I like reviews. Maupe, you know that in this society, there is a historical attitude toward voice. It's not just the voice of women, it's the voice of those who say that they do not agree with a situation, or who, like me, are persistent in demanding public accountability from those that lead, from institutions that belong to society. It is a historical, more or less, culture. And so that attitude pervades the way that our lawmakers are behaving. I was actually very pleased with what happened yesterday, because now it's in the public domain what women endure in many instances, and the rest of society may know a little about it, but has not focused on it. I think that it has now come to the top of our public agenda that we should not allow for a society that shuts down voices. You know, you're on Twitter, you're on social media. You know how many years I have been cyber-stalked and bullied by operators of governments or of politics in this country. Their minions are paid to constantly just insult. Insult doesn't do anything to me. Yesterday, actually, I felt nothing at what he was doing. I was more interested in ensuring that Natasha, Senator Uduaha, will never not get the justice that she's asking for. And for us, it's simply give her the opportunity of fair hearing. It is the least that a Senate that cares about public integrity of public institutions should do. Why are the senators running away from the core and central issue? Why? Why are they doing all other things but not responding to this cry by a woman who said, this injustice shall not be sustained? And we all, reasonable people of this country, agree with her that until the Senate does that, all of these kinds of drama that was presented yesterday would not persuade anybody. Nothing that Dr. Abiola, the petitioner, nor myself did in trying to establish that we had voice and that we needed to be heard was in any way inappropriate.
This one question, because one of the conversations we've had in the course of this week, madam, is that of whether or not democracy is still on its feet. And that was the part of the major conversation at an event that my colleague with you there, with Mark, where, attended earlier in the week in Abuja, where some people who sat were asking the question whether or not democracy was alive or was in danger or in jeopardy in Nigeria. This occurrence that happened, madam, does it say anything to you about our 20-something-year-old democracy, or it's just a standalone event?
It's a very interesting question that you've asked, and reflecting on it and being data-driven by it, I want you to know that the Economist magazine normally measures and ranks democracies around the world. We, as a country, are in the group of countries that are not regarded as democracy. We have a score of less than 4 out of a possible 1, out of 4 out of a possible 10. So that already situates us in terms of our democratic credentials. And yet, within that evidence, we see many things that suggest that the many decades of militarization of Nigeria left a very serious dent on our capacity as citizens to fully understand democracy. The example that we are discussing today being the things that have played out in our National Assembly at different times in its existence, I think this is probably the 10th Assembly or so, we have seen an attitude of those who are supposed to understand the ethos and principles and nuances and the culture of democracy, not in any way exemplified. So, for example, when I, as a citizen, step out there, which I do frequently, to make a statement on an issue of national significance, what do you think happens? The politicians immediately release their cannons through those who are their trolls on social media to insult and to want to shut down. I hope you know that there have been many women as leaders around the world who simply could not stand up to the cyber bullying. And so they either decided to leave office or they decided to leave the media space, therefore deepening and accentuating these historical and systemic barriers to women participating usefully in democracies. So what is the key thing? I think the key thing is for Nigerians to understand that the episode of Senator Natasha is not about Senator Natasha. People miss it. Even in the case of women who have spoken or misspoken concerning her matter, the issue is that there is a system that is a system of democracy, and there are rules of democracy. There is a constitution that must be respected as a ground of our society. Now, all of these pillars of democracy, when any group of people or a single person can override them, and the rest of society just takes position on the basis of whether they like a person or don't like a person, they are setting themselves up for a future destruction. Because it doesn't select. When you enable a system of injustice, you enable a system of opacity and not transparency. When you enable a system of unaccountable use of power, when you enable and are enamored by a system that agrees with abuse of public power, then you cannot say that you are growing your democratic credentials. The world is watching us. And ultimately, the call that I have is for young women to not even, they should see the fact of my stance, Dr. Akiode's stance, Akiode Abiola's, Afolabi's stance yesterday, the stance of the real heroine of this matter, Senator Uduaghan, to be the ways that societies and women have made societies that refuse to recognize the participation of women to eventually be on the national agenda. And so it is progress for us. They saw yesterday the kind of things that happen that must not continue to happen. That is the beginning of the journey toward progress.
All right, Dr. Ezekwesili, let me quickly ask Dr. Akiode now as we wrap up. The matter has now been adjourned sine die in the Senate. What is your next line of action?
Well, two things happened. They adjourned it sine die, but they closed the matter. You know, because by the end of the discussion, they came up with another agenda, that the matter is already in court, and that their committee do not have the power to investigate the matter, and so they brought out the rule of the National Assembly to justify that opinion. Although that also brought out another issue about, so why did you invite the petitioner in the first instance? if you were really actually working with your rule. Yeah, we would continue holding our head high.
As you should.
Yes, and we believe that we cannot be silenced. So we would continue to advocate for justice and fairness in the matter of Senator Natasha.
You haven't said where precisely. Where is that advocacy going to continue?
Well, there are cases in court, so we would continue to stand with her in the court case, and we'll continue to mobilize Nigerians to speak in favor of justice for Senator Natasha.
Well, I have to thank you both. Dr. Obi Ezekwesili is a former Minister of Education, a former Vice President at the World Bank for Africa, and also the founder of School of Fixed Politics. Dr. Ezekwesili, you are certainly not a disgrace to womanhood. Thank you so much for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you very much, Malcolm.